So it's a fantastic place to be a puffin. There are no ground predators, there's protection. On the other hand, if you're going to increase in numbers, and we increased from 5 pairs then to 2,000 pairs in 1972. When I started up to about 80,000 pairs in 2003, you've got to have a lot of food. I mean, you've got to have a hell of a lot of fish, however small a bird that you are. And there seems to be profound changes in the North Sea where man removed all the large fish, the large cod, the haddock and those sorts of things, for human consumption. And the numbers of small fish increased, and this allowed the seabirds to increase. You've got a lot of big fish that are of no use to seabirds, they're just too big. I mean, puffins will only eat fish up to about 20 centimeters long. Anything bigger than that is safe from a puffin.
So every year influenza does strike. It causes seasonal flu outbreaks, and that's caused by new influenza strains. It affects about 5 to 20% of U.S. residents, and 200,000 people become sick each year, and 36,000 people die from flu. And sometimes flu viruses can actually mutate to form novel viruses. We worry about novel influenza's subtypes because they can cause pandemics, and a pandemic is a global outbreak of a disease. The most severe influenza pandemic in the last century occurred in 1980. And it was caused by a flu virus called H1N1. It began in the United States around September 14, and within 5 weeks, and it spread throughout the entire United States. It's estimated that 20 to 100 million people died worldwide from that year, and it included 500,000 Americans.
This is one thing we can say about babies. Human babies compared to babies of other species is that we are entirely dependent on our carers to bring us up and for us to survive. And so it's very important for babies to get into relationships with somebody who's going to look after them well. So, biology has meant that babies and the adults are geared up to be in relationship with each other from the start.
The question that most people want to ask at this point is, how do we speed up the transition? If it's a good idea to have fewer people in the world, which may or may not be the case, then how might we move towards a situation in which population growth rates are reduced? How might we speed up the transition, the demographic transition that I've talked about? And I think there are probably 4 kinds of answers. I'm not going to suggest that all the kinds of answers, but those are the most obvious ones.
Working together, they figured out that if the government was going to propose some kinds of significant tax increases, which is a good strategy, quite me to at least tie something like getting something for those big tax breaks, not seeing any results. So the result of that was in the package of legislation that included the tax increases. There was awesome information to have significant expansion of coverage families where they can buy into their private insurance.
So a virus is something that you can't see by normal light microscopy. You need very advanced techniques for electron microscopy to see it. But that virus is not able to reproduce itself without a host, and us as human beings are made up of lots of different cell types, and we are interested in understanding at the molecular level how that virus infects the liver, and why does it infect the liver and it doesn't infect the heart, or it doesn't infect other tissues.
UK has an aging population as a result of decline in birth fertility rate and mortality rate. This has led to a declining proportion of the population age under 60 and an increasing proportion age 65 and over. In every year since 1901, with the exception of 1976, there have been more births and deaths, and the population has grown due to natural change. Until the mid-1990s, this natural increase was the main driver of population growth.
In that month or 6 weeks, the patient may feel perfectly well. He may even travel around the world, spending hours packed into crowded airplanes with unsuspecting fellow passengers. That's bad enough with regular TB, or with strains that are resistant to 2 or 3 mainline drugs used to treat the disease. But it's a potential public health catastrophe with a new strain called XDRTB. For extensively drug-resistant tuberculosis, the strain is impervious to a wide array of first and second-line drugs. That's why 30% or more of its victims die. And that's why people like Lawrence Gostin are rethinking what public health authorities should do about people with suspected XDR-TB in the weeks before the diagnosis is in.
Fungi are an important part of any forest or woodland ecosystem. They are the major agents by which twigs and leaves are broken down, releasing nutrients for reabsorption by plants. And we know fungi also form a constructive partnership with living trees. David Robinson from the Open University's Life Sciences Department explains that although we have known about this partnership and relationship for some time, we are now learning more about the nature of that relationship.
I'm absolutely delighted first of all to have been appointed to this professorship. The role is going to be about public engagement in science. It is about making science accessible to as wide an audience as possible. It's about encouraging young people to think about science as a career. It's about making it easier for academics here at the University of Birmingham to talk about their research to the general public, and it's not just about a one-way flow of information. It very much is about a dialogue.
To begin with, you should be standing in the main floor of the British Library. British Library is situated on the Euston Road next to some pipe crustacean press, in the foyer to the left of the information desk. It was a large white staircase. Follow this up towards the gallery at the top of the stairs. Pause and look to your left for attention. This is Robert Cotton, born in 1570 and died in 1631. Cotton was a member of Parliament, but he is mainly known as a great antiquarian collector of manuscripts. It is the covenant we have a great depth and the survival of many English manuscripts. Throughout this tour, we will see his legacy,
Social harm originates out of a series of debates within criminology about the narrowness of the definition of crime that essentially focuses on individual acts of harm, things like interpersonal violence, theft, so on and so forth. So the idea of social harm originally was to expand that notion of harm to encompass the harms that organizations cause, that nation-states cause. But latterly the idea of social harm really now transcends criminology, so there are a group of writers who think that, and I would include myself there, that actually there's something to social harm that could be very useful in terms of trying to understand the harms that occur within society, to produce an objective and well-rounded analysis of harm.
Well, 3D printing started in the 1980s. At that time it used to be referred to as rapid prototyping, where companies were able to use it, for instance, to visualize the shape of the component or a component they're about to make. But then during the last 10 years the technology has evolved from the prototyping level to the manufacturing level, specifically when it started to move from plastics to metallic materials. My interest specifically is in the field of high-value additive manufacturing, meaning that we use additive manufacturing to produce components for aeroplanes or for cars.
Perhaps you've seen pictures of the large array of, those radio telescopes in New Mexico, scanning the skies for intelligent life in the movie Contact. Well, radiant astronomers have cause to celebrate the first phase of a giant new radio telescope array went operational in Northern California. It's going to help astronomers study things like black holes and dark galaxies, all the while scanning the stars for, who knows, radio signals coming from somewhere else in the universe. Maybe ET is phoning home.
For the first time, Japanese researchers have conducted a real-life experiment that shows how some traffic jams appear for no apparent reason. They placed 22 vehicles on a single track and asked the drivers to cruise around at a constant speed of 30 kilometers an hour. At first, traffic moves smoothly, but soon, the distance between cars started to vary, and vehicles clumped together at one point on the track, but the jam spread backward around the track, like a shockwave at a rate of about 20 kilometers an hour. Real-life jams move backward at about the same speed.
As Joe noted, one really important point here is that we are really at the very beginning of seeing what is going on. And what we are seeing in the credit markets is a pricing of risk initially. Investors were pricing their investments. And the kind of deals they were asking for were ones where they had a historically low premium required for the risk that they were taking. And now, the pendulum has swung much the other way, because I think that people really don't understand exactly how much risk they are taking, and I'm sure that they are waiting on the sidelines to see.
This is one thing we can say about babies. Human babies compared to babies of other species is that we are entirely dependent on our carers to bring us up and for us to survive. And so it's very important for babies to get into relationships with somebody who's going to look after them well. So, biology has meant that babies and the adults are geared up to be in relationship with each other from the start.
The effect of the first difference is, on the one hand, to refine and enlarge the public views, by passing them through the medium of a chosen body of citizens, whose wisdom may best discern the true interest of their country, and whose patriotism and love of justice will be least likely to sacrifice it to temporary or partial considerations.
It is about 100 years since that great Canadian-born physician Sir William Osler, Regius Professor of Medicine in Oxford, complained about the increasing influence of the pharmaceutical industry on the medical professions. If he knew how this influence had increased since then, he would be turning in his grave at the way the industry now dominates doctors' prescribing habits. It does this not only by direct and indirect pressure on the doctors themselves, but also by encouraging the public to ask for scripts and to demand that governments provide the money.
And one particular crop, almonds in the US and now in Australia, is transforming the world of beekeeping and of bees. What has happened is that something serendipitous came along, that people found out, that doctors found out that almonds are good for you. They are actually a food that is normally considered a confection, but it's good for you. The Almond Board got a very aggressive promotion going on for almonds. I just heard recently, they send out sales reps to cardiologists at hospitals to promote the heart benefits of almonds, so they go right to the doctors to do this. So they leave no stone unturned in a very good promotion of almonds, and it's legitimate promotion because they are a healthy food. So what's happened is worldwide, almond sales have taken off. There's little doubt that genetically modified crops have the potential to offer great benefits to the world, yet they continue to be opposed by many people, even though any risks attached to their use have not been clearly established. The reasons seem to be a deep distrust of the motives of large agricultural companies, along with a generalized feeling that it's always dangerous to, as some would put it, play around with nature.
Signs that secured borrowing remains robust and firm data on manufacturing and retail sales, released on Thursday, painted the picture of an economy that has yet to be cooled by the recent spate of interest rate rises.
Again, I want to repeat that I don't blame libertarians for this state of affairs. My argument is really that they simply have nothing to offer us in this debate. When we talk about trying to get rid of the welfare policies that have enabled some of the breakdown of family, that is undoubtedly important, but I think we're beyond that at this point. The damage is so deep, and it's kind of hard for me to envision a future without Social Security, for instance. I quite agree with the analysis that the Social Security, Medicare and that sort of thing, have decreased the primary functions of the family. But I cannot imagine a world in which we get rid of these things. So that we will be from a pragmatic point of view, we have to think about what we can do to try to bolster up this breakdown that I keep referring to.
Green chemistry is a concept designed to develop technologies which allow chemistry to be practiced with minimal damage to the environment or in an environmentally compatible way, and it's meant to cover both chemical processes and chemical products. The center was set up about 7 or 8 years ago, and the idea was to provide a hub of activities that covered fundamental research work, international collaboration, but also educational development on public understanding of the project as well, and also networking, so we network out to well over 1,000 people around the globe.
Dave Hackenberg, a beekeeper since 1962, can usually tell what killed his bees just by looking at them. If they're lying on the ground in front of a hive, it's probably pesticides, he says. If the bees are deformed and wingless, it's probably vampire mites. But last fall, Hackenberg saw something he had never seen before. Thousands of his bee colonies simply disappeared. He was in Florida at the time, pulling the lids off some of his commercial hives. To his horror, they were all empty.